For more than 3 decades, working inside rehabilitation clinics and surgical recovery wards, I noticed a pattern that most people never realize until it quietly begins affecting their lives. It wasn't always the big accidents or sudden illnesses that changed a person's independence. Many times the turning point began in a far more ordinary moment right after waking up. I remember a patient named Robert, a retired engineer who had spent most of his life hiking, repairing things around his home, and proudly telling everyone that he had never needed help from anyone. At 76, he still considered himself strong and capable. But one winter morning, he told me something that caught my attention. He said the strangest part of aging wasn't pain or fatigue. It was the way his body felt confused when the day started. Like his legs and balance needed time to remember how to work together again. At first he ignored it, assuming it was just stiffness from sleep. But weeks later he experienced something that would completely change how he saw his health. One morning, he got out of bed the same way he always had. No rush, no unusual movement. Just a simple step toward the bathroom. But the moment his foot touched the floor, his balance faltered in a way he had never experienced before. His knee buckled slightly, his foot hesitated, and within seconds he found himself grabbing the wall to keep from falling. He didn't collapse that day, but the experience shook him deeply. For the first time in his life, he felt uncertain about something as basic as standing up. What made the situation more puzzling was that Robert wasn't weak in the traditional sense. His medical reports were relatively good. His muscles still had strength, and he stayed moderately active. Yet his body reacted as if something essential had been switched off overnight. As weeks passed, he started moving more cautiously. He walked slower, avoided stairs when possible, and held onto railings even when he didn't truly need them. His family assumed he was just becoming more careful with age. But inside, Robert felt something else, an invisible loss of confidence that grew every morning. The moment his feet touched the ground, then something unexpected happened during one of his routine rehabilitation evaluations. Instead of asking him to walk immediately, the therapist asked him to remain lying down for a moment and perform a few gentle movements before standing. Robert was confused at first. He had always believed that stretching briefly or simply getting up was enough, but these movements were different. They weren't about flexibility. They were slow, controlled actions designed to wake up muscles that had been inactive during sleep. At first, Robert felt almost silly performing them. They looked too simple to matter. But something surprising occurred the moment he stood afterward. His legs felt more responsive, his balance steadier. As if the connection between his brain and body had suddenly become clearer. The therapist explained something that most people never think about. During long periods of rest, especially overnight, the body's communication system between nerves and muscles becomes quieter. Muscles cool down, joints stiffen, and the brain temporarily loses the sharp coordination it relies on for safe movement. When someone stands up too quickly without reactivating those systems, the body can react unpredictably. That small delay in coordination can be enough to trigger instability, especially in older adults. Robert continued this routine every morning. The movements were gentle and required no equipment, just patience and attention. Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. The hesitation he once felt when standing gradually disappeared. His steps became smoother again, and the cautious tension he carried in his posture started fading. But the most powerful change wasn't physical. It was psychological. Robert told me that for the first time in months, he woke up without worrying about that first step of the day. His confidence returned slowly but unmistakably. What made his story even more interesting was how it affected the people around him. His wife noticed the difference first. She said he moved through the house the way he used to, without gripping furniture or pausing before each step. Soon his children began asking what had changed. They had assumed aging simply meant losing balance over time. But Robert explained that the body wasn't necessarily weaker. In many cases, it was simply unprepared when the day began. Once the right muscles were activated and the nervous system was engaged again, the body remembered how to move safely. Stories like Robert's repeated themselves throughout my career. Again and again, I met people who believed their mobility was fading permanently, only to discover that a simple change in their morning routine could restore stability they thought was gone forever. Yet not every story had such a positive ending. One patient I met years earlier experienced the same early warning signs Robert had described: morning instability, stiff legs, and a subtle loss of coordination. Unfortunately, he dismissed those signals as normal aging. One morning, he stood up quickly without giving his body time to prepare. His balance shifted unexpectedly, and he fell beside his bed before he even had a chance to react. The injury that followed forced him into months of recovery and permanently changed his independence. That moment stayed with me because it showed how small, overlooked habits can shape the direction of someone's life. The difference between Robert's story and that earlier patient was not strength, age, or determination. It was awareness. One person understood what his body needed before the first step of the day, and the other didn't realize it until it was too late. When people hear stories like these, they often assume the lesson is about exercising harder or becoming more active. But the real message is much simpler and far more surprising. The most critical moment for stability often happens before a person even leaves the bed. The body needs a short transition from rest to movement, a way to wake up muscles, stimulate circulation, and reconnect the brain's control over balance. Without that transition, even a strong body can respond unpredictably. With it, movement becomes smoother, safer, and far more confident. Robert eventually returned to hiking short trails near his home, something he feared he might never do again after that frightening morning beside his bed. He once told me that the most valuable lesson he learned wasn't about aging at all. It was about listening to the quiet signals the body gives before bigger problems appear. Those signals often arrive subtly through stiffness, hesitation, or a moment of lost balance, but they are warnings that something important needs attention. When people recognize them early and respond with the right habits, the outcome can be dramatically different. The body regains coordination, confidence returns, and independence continues far longer than many people expect. And every time I think about Robert's story, I'm reminded that sometimes the most powerful changes in health begin with something incredibly small. What happens in the very first moments after waking up?